Hello and welcome to the Divorce Sanctuary. My name is Elizabeth Goddard, and on this channel I talk about healing from emotional abuse and divorcing from the emotional abuser, but not only divorcing physically but also divorcing emotionally. In this video I'm talking about divorce settlement checklists. It's a form I found online and I'm just going to talk through it. Maybe use it as a stepping stone or foundation blocks. It's got some interesting information in there, interesting questions, and at the end of each section I'll just talk about my understandings, my experiences, and just ask a few more questions around the subject. If you're new to the channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you're returning, welcome back and thank you so much. And thank you so much to all my new subscribers. Thank you so much for your support. Now, in this video I have got a divorce settlement checklist that I'm going to talk through. I will go through each section and make comments on how different it would be with an emotional abuser. The first section is children, so I will put some timings down below in the description box. So you can, if you don't have children and that isn't part of the negotiation, you can just move forward on to the next section. So this list is not exhaustive. It can be used as a stepping stone or the foundations. Everyone's different. Everyone's circumstances are different. So it just might be things that you need to consider that you haven't thought of. So we start with children, which is, have you and your spouse come to an agreement on custody, on visitation, living arrangements and support? Have you and your spouse reached an agreement on dividing costs for after school activities, what happens during the summer holidays if you're working, school clothing? Have you and your spouse agreed on ground rules for leaving the children at home, for technology usage? Meeting potential new interests in each other's lives? Have you and your spouse thought about how your agreement will affect your relationship to your children in the future? Have you built in safeguards on how to make discussions, how best to co-parent? Do you and your spouse have mechanisms in your agreement that dictate how disagreements and stalemates are to be handled? Do you believe these agreements are the best for your children? Do you believe your spouse finds these agreements to be the best for your children? Are you certain your spouse thoroughly understands these agreements and intends to adhere to them? Those last three are really important. Children should be first over everything. And my experience in my own relationships and people that I've worked with and people that I know is that you need to put obviously you need to put the children first, but you need to put in maybe age markers that you start renegotiating and looking at certain elements. When my own children were quite young, I divorced, and when they were teenagers, that the same visitation was in place, and it clearly wasn't working for my children. But my ex-husband at that point wouldn't budge because his attitude was, well, this is what you wanted. So maybe put age markers, put that on your list. Is there going to be a point that you need to really start looking again at visitation? Is there a point that you need to start looking again at maintenance or support, child support? Is there an age that you need to, and it might be the same time that you review it every 3 years or you review it every year. The last three are really, really important. Do you believe these arrangements are in the best interest of your children? Do you believe your spouse finds these agreements in the best interest of the children? And are you certain your spouse thoroughly understands these agreements and intends to adhere to them? And that's the same for you. Do you thoroughly understand these and want to stick to them? With emotional abusers, we know they like playing games. Number 2 is spousal support. Have you and your spouse reached an agreement on spousal support? Have you reached an amount? Given consideration to a time period for the support and whether it should be modified or not? Are you certain your spouse thoroughly understands these agreements and intends to adhere to them. Money is a form of control. It gives them power. Any agreement that you have, again, have time periods to look at it. It might be that it's to do with change of jobs. I would also always suggest that you look, once it's in place, that you look at securing your own income. I've known people that have had a spousal agreement in place that has been changed. The partner who's earning the money, the larger income, as a result of consequences of their action, lost their job and was then unable to pay the support, have changed the payments for various different reasons because their circumstances change. Once everything's settled, put yourself in a position that you are responsible, and it also is empowering that you are then not reliant on them for support. Money is a form of control. It's a way of controlling, whether it's done by the amount, whether it's done by changing the payment dates, putting you in a position that you can't live without them, and they then have control over you and your life. So where possible, I would urge you to look at other revenue income streams. Number 3 is property settlement. So have you and your spouse reached an agreement on dividing assets like the marital home, cars, maybe holiday homes, and have those decisions been made taking into account any ramifications of each division? So for example, maybe there's taxes or upkeep on the properties. Have you and your spouse reached an agreement on distribution of liabilities like credit cards, debit cards, mortgages? Have the decisions been made with full consideration of tax implications, practical implications of changing the responsibilities in contracts? Have you and your spouse come to an agreement on how to divide bank accounts and stocks and shares? Have you and your spouse agreed to a division of personal effects, household goods and furnishings? Have you and your spouse mutually agreed upon tax exemptions, i.e. for the children? Have you and your spouse agreed on the division of retirement assets like pensions? Have you made these decisions understanding the full financial and tax implications for both of you? Have you and your spouse discussed health insurance? Have you and your spouse agreed on what rights you will maintain in regards to each other's life insurance policies? Do you feel that you have full and accurate understanding of your partner's finances? Do you believe your spouse has full and accurate understanding of your finances? Are you certain your spouse thoroughly understands these agreements and intends to adhere to them? When you're going through this process, make sure that you're emotionally divorced from your partner, or as much as you can be. Make sure that they are not dictating and overriding your wishes. Make sure that this is done with you and your needs first and foremost. The cost of the divorce. Have you and your spouse agreed on how to cover the costs of divorce with fees, filing fees, court fees? And are you sure or certain that your spouse thoroughly understands these agreements and intends to adhere to them? Being emotionally divorced from them means that when you hear things like, "Don't worry, I'll pay for it," or "Leave it to me, I'll look after you," that you trust your gut instinct and that you actually look out for yourself, because those comments with an emotional abuser are actually coming from a place where they're looking out for themselves and nobody else. They've already had a negotiation in their head and they've agreed what they believe that you would be entitled to, your share would be. The next one's emotional issues. Do you and your spouse have mechanisms built into your agreement to address future conflicts that may arise between the two of you? Do you think you have an understanding of how this agreement that's been reached will affect you financially and emotionally in the future? Do you feel that your spouse has a thorough understanding of how this will affect them financially and emotionally in the future? Do you feel that either one of you made the decision out of anger, shock, or denial? And I'm going to add my own one here, which is, do you think that you made this decision through coercion? If you've been in an emotionally abusive relationship, you might be experiencing the pain when coming out of it, the trauma bonds that hold you there. You might have experienced financial coercion. You might have experienced other forms of coercion. When you're making these decisions, are they your decisions? Were you allowed to make them freely? Were you allowed to negotiate? As I said at the beginning of the video, this is a checklist. Maybe use it as a foundations or setting foundations. Maybe use it as part of a plan to think about whether you've been allowed to negotiate. When you come out of this type of relationship, an emotionally abusive relationship, there's so much going on. You're unpacking a relationship that wasn't real, and you are having to then negotiate with them, somebody who is out to claim power and control every element, every part of you, and they might transfer that into controlling the divorce. And it's really crucial that you take care of yourself and you make sure that you heal the trauma bonds and you emotionally divorce from them, so that you get the deal that works for you. And that doesn't have to be a monetary deal or as monetary loaded. Sit down and create a plan. Have 3 rows and put in there the things that you want, the things that you are not prepared to negotiate on. And then have another one which are things that you are prepared to negotiate on, and a third one which are your giveaways. This is about winning. For them, it's all about winning, and they don't care what it costs them financially as long as they win. So for you to have things that you're prepared to give away that you don't mean as much to you, they are your bargaining tools. But you need to be emotionally divorced from them. Otherwise, held in that trauma bond, they will just control the whole situation. I hope you found this useful. If you'd like to find out more about working with me, I'll put the links below in the description box. I'll also put the link to my group, The Divorce Sanctuary, that's on Facebook, and I'll put the links to both my books, Finding Lily and The A to Z of Emotional Abuse. Don't forget to like and subscribe the video, and I'm sending you loads and loads and loads of love.